Again. Greetings, family. I'm so happy to have you join us in the circle today. It's the turn of the season. It's a special time for each of us to consider what care looks like for ourselves. And it's my honor to spend some time with you today. My name is Ashara Ekundayo. I'm an independent curator and interdisciplinary creative arts practitioner and the host of BLATANT. BLATANT is an ongoing forum and live zine series on art, joy, and rage that centers the lived experiences and radical imagination of Black women artists and cultural laborers creating across discipline and across geography. It is co-presented by Artists as First Responder and the Museum of the African Diaspora. These are informal, uncensored, and layered conversations that celebrate the lived experiences of artists whose creative practices heal communities and save lives. Those are the artists who I invite to the table for the conversation. Our custom is to begin each episode with an acknowledgement to the land from which we host the conversations. I greet you today from the unceded land of the Muwekma and Ramaytush Ohlone people, now known as Oakland, California. These lands were cultivated and stewarded and cared for by many nations of indigenous people who lost all or much of their land, their languages, and their cultures through acts of genocide, fraudulent treaties, forced labor, forced assimilation, and other acts of violence on the part of the settlers and the state. We acknowledge that if we are not indigenous people to this land, that we continue to benefit from the genocide and dispossession of indigenous people, and that we have a responsibility to recognize, respect, and support the sustained presence of indigenous people today. The Ohlone people continue to resist, survive, and thrive here in the Bay Area. So thank you. We also honor our African ancestors and offer them gratitude and water for their guidance and protection in this life and in this work. And what has also become part of our opening ceremony is our offering of our deep breaths for our newly dead. So I'm inviting you now to take 3 deep breaths here and to try to exhale twice as long as you inhale. So for instance, I'm going to inhale for 4 counts and exhale for 8. Take a breath. And another. And the last one. Today's show is dedicated to the people of Haiti, those on the island and those throughout the diaspora. We send specific love to the families who have risked everything to cross natural and human-made borders to save their lives and to seek asylum. Ashe? And we sit honestly with our feelings of hope, of loss, of grief, of joy, of anger, and sometimes even of indifference. So I invite you to take a moment to appreciate yourself and all that you had to accomplish today in order to be able to sit here with us for an hour and a half. Thank you. I am honored, truly honored, to welcome April Bey and Niama Safia Sandy to the circle at BLATANT. Peace, y'all. What up, though? And where you be on the planet? Where you be? And would you like to offer a land acknowledgement from where you sit today?
Yeah, I would actually like to give thanks and acknowledge my presence on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded land and territory of the Tongva peoples. This territory also currently being known as Glendale, California. And I also wanted to thank you, Ashara, for the invitation and hosting Moab. Yeah, keep it short.
Peace, thank you.
Hello, hello, hello. Thank you so much for having me and for this invitation. I am reaching you from the unceded lands of the Lenni Lenape. I'm currently in Newark in my studio, but I am based in New York City, which is also Lenni Lenape land. And again, we are grateful for their stewardship and the fact that if it wasn't for them, cultivating that land, we wouldn't be here.
Ashe. I know, recently we've had more time to consider the burial grounds, the places where the bodies are being found and that have laid and have decomposed and become part of our environment again. And so just also, honoring the bones of all of our ancestors that are holding us up right now. I'll start the show with just reading some very abbreviated bios and then open it up to you all for just some opening thoughts. April Bey is a Los Angeles-based visual artist and arts educator whose interdisciplinary artwork is an introspective and social critique of American and Bahamian culture, contemporary pop culture, feminism, generational theory, social media, Afrofuturism, Afro-surrealism, post-colonialism, and constructs of race within supremacist systems. April's work is in the collection at the California African American Museum in Los Angeles, the National Art Gallery of the Bahamas, the Center for Contemporary Printmaking, Fullerton College Art Gallery, and more. I had the gift of seeing April's work earlier this year in May at CAM, and I was really overtaken by how grand it was and the use and the utility of the fiber work and the paper work and the installation work. And it made me want to know more about you. And I think at that point, I just started kind of like scouring the internet so I could find out about you, and was really glad when you were willing to reach out and connect with me on Instagram. So welcome. Thank you for being here with us. Niama Safia Sandy is a New York-based cultural anthropologist, curator, producer, and multidisciplinary artist. Her creative practice delves into the human story through the application and critical lens of culture, healing, history, migration, race, ritual, and so much more, including music. Cannot leave that out. She sees her role as that of an agitator, one who endeavors to simultaneously call into question and make sense of seemingly arbitrary nature of modern life, and to celebrate our shared humanity in the process. Niama is also co-founder of We Are the Blacksmiths, which is a coalition of artists and organizers committed to using art to support direct action and civic engagement in service of Black liberation and equality and equity, and is a member of the Resistance Revival Chorus, comprised of women and non-binary activists and artists singing in the spirit of joy and resistance. I'm so glad to have you here and to be able to sit with you as well. Curator, sister, educator, anthropologist, and I'm looking forward to listening in on where we can go, with this kind of like multifaceted way of presenting and embodying this work in collective liberation in service to our community. Opening thoughts before I can start in with a question, but if you have opening thoughts, I'm welcome. I'm welcoming you to this forum here. Okay.
Oh, wait, I was on screen.
Okay, come on.
I was looking at notes and then first. So today I sat here, I'm supposed to be writing, but I happened to actually see Fabiola Jean-Louise's post. I don't know if any of you follow her, incredible Haitian American artist. And so she posted this video of a peacock sort of like opening its feathers. And I had been, we'll get to this eventually, but I'm starting to make work And so I had been sort of thinking about eyes and like adding them to this sort of body of work that I'm thinking through. And so I sat here and I started like researching peacocks and thinking about expansiveness and expanded consciousness and all of that. And I think that's a good place for us to start, considering everyone's work here. I think that's something that we're all sort of after in one way or the next. That's my offering.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. April, do you have some thoughts at this time? It's okay if you don't.
I don't.
Okay, it's okay. So let's open our conversation. I'd like to talk about creative navigation. So between politics and aesthetics, and/or between racialized production and gendered labor. How have these aspects of society manifested in your practice? Your practices, practi.
Can you say that again? I want to make sure I have it.
Yeah, I can. So it's a conversation, it's a question around creative navigation. So the navigation either between politics and aesthetics, and/or between racialized production and gendered labor. How have these aspects of society manifested in your practice? I guess is really the question.
You're trying to get me in trouble.
No, anthropologist, I'm trying to hear the answer. Bring it.
Oh, so many things. I mean, even today, somebody tagged me on something and I was like, ooh.
Oh,
I just think we're in a particularly fraught. I mean, it's been fraught. When was it not fraught, right? But I think that we're in a moment where the optics are like this very loaded thing that like maybe in a way that it hasn't been before, especially because of the way things have happened in the last 18 months in particular. It's, and I almost feel like last summer like never happened. It's really weird.
I agree. It's like, what did I do last year? It never happened. I mean, I did go, I don't know. It never happened.
And as such, I think that we have to be really careful about what we lend our voices to right now, and like the way that we speak about our work, the way that we speak about the point of the work. And I think for a lot of people, there's a lot of recalibration happening. I know for myself, that's the case. And so, you know, where do these conversations about do the politics match what it is, or what it actually is? And I think that's the question that we're seeing unfurled before our eyes right now. And often, you know, what is it? The blinds don't match the, what is it? What is that turn of phrase? Something doesn't match the drapes. What is it?
Oh, you know what? I don't know that. I don't know. Do you know that saying, April? I get the gist of what you're saying.
Yeah.
I do, you know.
So I think it's a moment where we're like, all like, ooh, wait a second. Ooh, wait, that's not working for me. And I feel like that's definitely been, especially over the last few months, like over the summer and into the fall for sure, it's definitely been like, all right, okay, let's move on to this thing that actually serves us and serves our work and serves our community, et cetera. So yeah, I hope that was an answer that made sense.
Yeah, well, they don't have to make sense. I mean, we're just stirring the pot right here, you know, racialized production. So it's like the production based on our Blackness, perhaps based on our gender identity, and all of the gray area in between that. I mean, April, tell me, you know, speak to me really about I've been dying to talk to you about your work, you know, because it landed on me as very political work. And even as I've been following your Instagram posts and your stories, there's this juxtaposition of this juggle that it makes me really want to ask, like, what do you like what are you like scratching at here? Because some of it feels really kind of like pop culture-ish, and some of it feels like this is a really poignant statement that you're trying to make with this post, and you seem to capture posts that have a lot of irony to them and humor to them, but then it just feels like it's raw anyway. So tell me about how you're navigating that creatively.
Yeah, I've been really interested in accessibility lately, and who has access to what and how that outputs aesthetically. And so like with my show at CAM, it's supposed to emulate the part of the airport that you walk through from when you get off the plane and you go to ground transport. So you should be seeing customs, you should be seeing advertisements for restaurants and hotels. And usually the imagery, at least in the Bahamas, where I'm from, is white people on vacation. And the only time you see Bahamians is when they're serving these tourists. And so when I make the art, and I am a maker of objects, and I want them to be accessible to everyone, not just the elite, not just the people who can afford to take a trip to my planet. There's a section in the show that's based off of a fictitious salon and travel agency that's based on my friend Maija's acrylic nail business here on Earth. And it's the idea of like Black women pampering themselves all day. And then at the end of the day, you have an itinerary that was perfectly aligned with your wants and needs, and showing actual fat Black women on vacation, but on another planet, because at the same time, that's almost what it would take. And I'm also thinking about, ironically, what you sent me earlier today, the concept of like, you know, Black women being harassed for living a regular, degular life that obscenely wealthy white men are allowed to live, being chastised and criticized for that. And so I'm trying to deal with accessibility and like humor in a way that is lowbrow, middlebrow, highbrow, but all equally valid in what they're trying to say, which is to decolonize the way you look at me, or the way you hear me. And also my access to pleasure and opulence. And that's the main thesis of the show that's at CAM. It's like you get to go on vacation to this other planet and you don't have to worry about things like passports and citizenship. What you need to focus on is your pleasure and opulence through that pleasure. I don't know if that answered your question. Kind of went on a tangent there. But yeah, that's
very into it.
That's my work. Even in the actual materiality of the work, always has a juxtaposition between formalism and purism. So like, I know how to paint, I know how to draw, but maybe I want to drill into that drawing and sew into wood. And perhaps like the quilter isn't going to like the way I apply the sewing, and the graphic designer isn't going to like the way my kerning of the text. A painter isn't going to like that I'm painting in thread, but it's accessible. Almost everyone can find different aspects of the process and materiality. And that's what I'm interested in. And that comes from also being a teacher and having to develop the skill of explaining a dense concept that I may not even believe in to a group of people that come from different backgrounds, that have different learning styles and communication styles. So when it comes to like my Instagram stories are a really good example of like the different aspects of myself as well. Like, I'm educated, I'm a tenured professor, but I'm ratchet too. And, you know, like I have different dialects that I speak, and like different restaurants I prefer over others. And it's more of a mosaic outlook on accessibility versus strictly binary. If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. I mean, you're speaking to this conversation that both of you are educators. Maybe say a little bit more around how you engage and embody the idea of the collective in how you create the work, you know, as educators, but also as multifaceted individuals. As you said, I'm a tenured professor who's ratchet. Like, we don't often talk about that, and there's a presentation and the so-called respectability politics that come into how we perform inside the institution, inside the academy, and the kind of, I think, expectations that come with being associated with the academy, and particularly in the arts sector. And we, over the last year and some now this is our second season of doing BLATANT, we have had the opportunity to speak to a lot of academics as well. And this is not an academic conversation. Like, this is not an exercise in using the words of the academy if you don't want to. So we've tried to make it a show that's accessible. So to folks who are like, I'm not a PhD student, I'm not a dissertator, but I am part of the collective. So say a little bit more, about how you create your work in the collective and having this conversation around collective accessibility.
Yeah, so it also goes down to the money part. We don't talk about money that much as artists and sales and whatnot, but I choose my muses very carefully. I've often watched them for months to years before I reach out to work with them. And it's because I want to see that there is a longevity and continuation in what they're doing. It doesn't matter what they're doing. It could be that they're competitive rodeo in an all Black girl competitive rodeo team, or they have a nail salon, or they have like a, body positive fat girl line. It doesn't matter what they're doing as long as it's something that we can grow together. And then as it gets into the hands of, the elite and the wealthy, whatever happens from that trickles down. And that's part of my practice, which is a rule-based practice, and where I source my materials and where the profits go after it gets out into the world. And that's an acknowledgement of I didn't come from this alone, and I can't do it alone. And unfortunately, a lot of my support comes from the same community. It doesn't come from those who end up with the end product and have the privilege of getting the end product. And and I've over the years decided that's okay. Like, because we can cook in our own kitchen and know exactly what's going into it and share it and share the burden of the labor that goes along with it. So a lot of the textiles that I use in my work come from women-owned businesses here, West Africa. And a lot of the muses are all over the place because, since COVID, we've gotten way more remote. So I'm able to collaborate much more. Whereas before I used to actually physically travel a lot to meet my accomplices. And so that aspect of the community is really important, but also because I myself am an artist living with disabilities and have needed more and more help in my studio just to do embarrassingly simple things like open a certain brand of paint tube that I can no longer open, or, bend down to a certain area to pick something up. And at first it was really traumatizing for me to see things going away that I could do before. But when you get a good team together, the embarrassment goes away and it's normalized. Your body is normalized in that space, and you no longer have to accommodate to the environment, but the environment is accommodating to you. So it's the constant reminders of that importance that influences my work, and also the message in my work, which is also to certain communities like, young Bahamians who are struggling still back home with, politicians that are still in power that I had to memorize when I was in high school, and archaic ways of thinking, the, Christopher Columbus statue still being up, like those frustrating things gets referenced in the work, and it pulls the alien, so to speak, to the planet that we need to be on, where we can have these conversations and not have to feel constantly belittled with bellicose reactions to what we're trying to do.
Ashe, thank you for all of that. It's really digging into what you were speaking to as well, Niama, the recalibration, and the acclimation, and what does that mean for us to I don't know, translate, do you want to offer anything in terms of, I think about your work as a collective, because you are, your practice, I witness your practice as collective practice.
Yeah,
Say
sure.
more. Yeah.
I mean, we'll get into this a bit as I get through, my slides later, but so much of it is in collective practice, in collective thought, in collective being, and really kind of like together arriving at the ideas, right? Arriving at, for example, I guess not this past weekend, but the one before, there was a small group of us in the chorus. And again, if you're just joining us, I'm a member of the Resistance Revival Chorus, which is a women in a non-binary group of singers, activists, and people somewhere in between, who basically, after the Women's March in 2017, really wanted to bring joy into, what we were seeing unfolding through He Who Shall Not Be Names administration, and really thinking about the ways that our voices could be used for powerful purposes, and to quote the poet Toy Derricotte, using joy as an act of resistance in particular. So anyway, we were invited to perform at Lincoln Center here in New York. They have a park just behind the center that they've been activating throughout the summer. So we were invited to perform, and it was supposed to be like 10 of us, but it ended up being like 7, or was it even 7? 1, 2, yeah, 7 of us. And it just was like perfect because we had to listen to each other and we had to trust each other, and you don't get that sound if you're not doing that, right? You don't get to like be in rhythm and in melody with each other if you're not listening, if you're not feeling each other, if you're not opening yourself in that way to do that, right? So that's just one example. Mm-hmm. And actually, some of the women that are in the chorus, some of the women who founded the chorus actually were involved in the creation of Joy to the Poles. So we'll get back into that in a bit. And I think now they refer to it as Joy to the People. And it's this kind of sustained effort really the whole point of that originally was de-escalation. So thinking about because personally, what happened on January 6th, I was pretty sure that was going to happen much sooner than that. Mm-hmm. I was happy to be wrong, but I was like, they're not done. It's happening. Don't worry. Please stay vigilant. And so in thinking about that, I'll name names. Nalini Stamp, who works with the Working Families Party, her and a bunch of the other women in the chorus, Ginny Suss, Paula Mendoza, they all came together and kind of developed these strategies of how do we bring joy? How do we bring music to people to keep them in lines that might be, these hours-long lines for people to vote and to do their civic duty in that process. And as such, Joy to the Poles was born. And so, from performances like the chorus, like people like Jean-Baptiste, people like, I think in Atlanta, there was a sustained effort, after that voting situation in January. You had people like Killer Mike, lots of other people. But then you also had like more community-based things like Moko Jumbies here in Brooklyn. You had, just so many different people that were involved. And I think we all were very clear about why that was necessary. So yeah. That's just one example.
Yeah, I mean, you're speaking straight to, the importance and the impact of the sonic aspect of our liberatory selves, you know what I mean? And, when you spoke about being in melody together, right? Being in harmony together, what we know is that you cannot simultaneously be in harmony, in rhythm together and adverse in conflict with each other, right? Mm-hmm. And so those of us who bring sonic sound, song, to the movement work, to the power building work, to the power sharing work, that is an absolute part of our history, part of the legacy of breath, of breathing together, right? The offering of breath, the offering of sound, and sometimes the offering of joy that comes from. I guess, you know, we could get into some presentation time, but let me see. I want to talk. I have one more thought, and it's really around how I see both of your work as Afrofuturist and poignant in the Afro now, and maybe speak to how you're bringing parts of yourself, your own, you know, maybe yourself as an artist, yourself as an educator, but yourself as a being into the future. Like, how do you pull parts of yourself kind of like, I don't know, want to say it's staying relevant, because that's not really what I mean, and that's not really what's important. But the aspect of doing the work that our ancestors be pleased, knowing that we are ancestors in this body, that there are folks before us, and not just people folks, but beings before us and people coming. So how are you exploring what that looks like, your practice of the future self?
I mean, are you like prepared to like, because I have a lot to say about this. You want to go first, or what's up?
You want to go? You want to go? Come on with it.
Cool. So for me, my first ever exhibition in the world, first thing in this space, incidentally, I don't know if you knew that, if you did a little research, it was called Black Magic Afro Pasts, Afro Futures. So it was a project that, incidentally, I had actually, like, now you're making me like find visual aids in this process. Let's see how fast I can do this. I'm pretty good at this. So I had the idea back in 2014. The exhibition opened in 2016. So ultimately it was thinking about this idea of like, and actually, April, this may resonate with you. Thinking about, so for context, my family's from the Caribbean. My mother was born in St. Vincent. My father was born in Trinidad. But even within that, within like 3 generations, there's people in Barbados, there's people in Grenada. It's just kind of all over the place. So I think of myself as very Caribbean, if you will. But obviously I was born here, and that allows me to make connections in ways that maybe I wouldn't have been. I'm literally like looking for something right now. So pardon my like darting eyes. So on the day that exhibition was installed, and of course, first show, first ever installation, first process of such a thing, all of that. Yeah, found it. So on that day, go to post, that was the day that Prince died. Very strange. And so one of the first things that I had selected for that show was, I don't know if any of you have ever heard of Underdog, the DJ. So he's a DJ, but he's also does like these edits. So we ended up doing what was then a video installation, his first video installation. And so some of the works that I had initially selected years before sort of made their way back into that, into the edit for that video installation. And again, so the context of the show was thinking about this idea of magical realism, which, like, you know, is a literary idea that's like sort of assigned to us, usually by white publishers, by white editors, but that's not like purely a like fictional way of thinking about the world. Like, this is often how we think about the world. This is a sort of ambulatory cosmology that we're thinking about and using to navigate the world, right? So what if we actually assign a visual value to that rather than thinking about it solely as like a thing that exists in a book that somebody published, right? So, you know, we had Underdog, who's actually from Panama. You had Adama Delphine Fawundu, who I like refer to as my work wife, because actually she was like sitting here a few hours ago. And just thinking about like, what does this look like across the diaspora in a way that we are like making work right now, and the ways that we are thinking about ourselves, and the ways that we push ourselves into the future, or the ways that we reach back into the past, right? So all of that to say, look at this and don't freak out. So this is what I picked for this show 2 years before it opened.
Okay. So prophecy here.
Like, I was like,
yeah.
Holy shit. Can I say shit? Sorry.
Yeah.
That's like my favorite thing to do. I have like another incident where I was like, yeah, they were like, it's HBO. You can definitely say shit. It's fine. Anyway, but yeah, so this was like, I want to say there were originally 4 edits of his that I had selected, and this was one of them.
Okay. But we're calling that ancestor into the circle today.
Yeah, we are. Always do.
Calling Prince in. Thank you. Thank you for that. Let's we're gonna stay on that tip, on that time travel tip. Hearing through the portal.
Yeah, actually, we're going to talk about all of this.
Going to peer through the portal. Yeah.
The portal. I'm all about the portal of late, because actually the way that I talk about joy, which maybe we'll get to, is certainly a portal making device.
Let's make sure we get to it.
Yeah.
April, let's start with your work, and thank you, Dr. Elizabeth Gessel, who's running tech for us today at MOAD, and Nia McAllister, who is also supporting with tech today. Thank you, Nia and Elizabeth. And I'm gonna let you lead us through the interview.
All right, thank you. So I'm going to talk a lot about process and materiality, and then the concept. So a lot of the work I'm making now is based on the concept that I'm an alien from another planet, and the planet is called Atlantica. And I'm fleshing out this narrative, but the narrative originally came from my father, as his way, being a Trekkie and a sci-fi nerd, of explaining racism or having the talk. Basically, he told me that we were aliens from another planet, and that's why we look differently. And so as an operative sent to Earth to observe and report, I have to report back to my planet basic things like Earth history. I also do mining of colonialism to produce high fashion wear on Atlantica called Colonial Swag. And this piece is based on the alternative history report, where I was researching feminism on Earth. We do have creative license when we report back to our planet. And so this is an example of how feminism was founded in North America by a group of Beyoncés. And what you're seeing is a tapestry, a custom tapestry. And when I use this tapestry, I am referencing, so I am African-American, but I'm also Caribbean. And I always try to put those two identities in my work. And the one thing that they both have in common is gifting these custom woven blankets or custom Sherpa blankets. Usually we gift them with like our loved one's face on it. So we're like, here's a blanket of your face, or of a loved one that passed. And so this is a digitally woven reproduction of a women's suffragette march with a group of Beyoncés over top, and the umbrella is sewn in Chinese knockoff wax fabric, African wax fabric. And the text, which is hard to see in a photograph, is glitter. Glitter comes up a lot in my work because it's the currency on Atlantica. It's the best solution that we found to deal with poverty, because glitter gets into everything and is everywhere. So no one really ever needs money. You can just shake your hair out when you go to dinner. Can we look at the next slide, please? That's just another view so you can get it for scale. Next, please. Detail. Next, please. So we're going to be seeing also portraits of Atlanticans on Atlantica. And this is pulling from imagery from my show at CAM right now. So the background tropical plants you see are actually appropriated from a design company that produces wall murals. And they specialize in like tropical country wall murals to help people make their apartment look tropical. I grew up with these plants, right? So I looked at the design firm because I was actually going to hire them to help me with my show. And then I saw that everyone on staff was white, mostly white women. And so I was like, well, I'm just going to go ahead and appropriate it and colonize it. So what you're looking at is several layers of the woven blankets that have been adhered to a wood panel and covered in resin. And then parts of it have been hand sewn back in, drilling holes. Can we look at the next slide? Ooh, next. Here's a detail. You're not going to see the glitter. The piece has so many conflicting textures and so many like blanket stitching into wood with delicate yarn that falls apart if you fart too hard. And a lot of the conflicting textures and conflicting techniques are to essentially get away from the purism and formalism that I felt I was held to within the academy. So a lot of my work has non-traditional techniques. Can we get next, please? Marsha P. Johnson is one of our ministers of culture and affairs on Atlantica. So these are serving also as, you know, professional portraits that would hang in different governmental buildings. And you're looking at a woven tapestry with hand-sewn Chinese knockoff wax fabric. Next, please. Next. Detail.
Can you speak to what is the size?
These are
tapestries?
Yes, I apologize. These are 60 inches by 80 inches tall. Next, please. This is 36 by 48. This is similar technique, only it has 3 different iterations of the print. So the piece is called The First Atlanticans, and this is an archival shot of the first group of Atlanticans to visit Earth. We did the best we could to look as close as we could to the Earthlings that we were attracted to. It is also a resin glittered, shiny, drippy amazingness with woven textiles drilled and sewn on top and puffy metallic pants sewn in on the bottom. Next, please. There's some detail. There are different kinds of thread. The thread ends up becoming a drawing. I hope I have some images of the back. Can we get next, please? Yeah. All of the work I do on the front, this is my favorite, you know. This is what I like the most, because I can see every frustration. Like, this is the largest I can go with this piece because my arms can only go so far into the center to sew. And it's very hard to sew on a hard, rigid surface. And oftentimes it's all feel. So I can see on here the mistakes where I've had to like start over and crisscross incorrectly. And I really like the drawings on the back. So I always make sure that I keep track of the back. Next, please. So I always work in multiples of 2. And there's so many reasons why, but mostly I have crippling anxiety. So if I do one piece, I'm always worried that it could have been better, or I make mistakes and I want to sort it out for the second one. And I also feel like sometimes they're lonely. So these 2 are actually actual friends in real life. So this is another version of the multiple tapestries and multiple layers of resin and sewing. Next, please. Very hard to photograph in person, and I apologize. Next, please. Some detail. You can kind of see that it's shiny. Next, please. Next. There's some details. So you maybe can't see it, but I can see a lot of struggle in this picture because these pieces really like had a lot of, it's a first technique for me, and I struggled with it. The piece ended up being heavier than I could actually carry myself once I corrected all of the issues. Next, please. Those are her edges. Next, please. So this is actually newer work. Still doing portraits of Atlanticans, and I'm really into plants. And if you do visit my show at CAM, the way that you're transported to Atlantica is through a portal of plants. And so now I'm starting to focus on, within this world building, I'm focusing on like little tiny things that I would need for my, condo or apartment or whatever that I would be living at. Plants are a big part of it. Next, please. Maybe we're frozen. Can we get next? There we go. Close up. Let's do next one more time. So this is easier to see. So again, and I apologize, my work doesn't look very good two-dimensionally, but in real life, this is really puffy Sherpa blanket. So it's got like fluffies underneath that have been compressed hard with different types of thread. There's metallic yarn, metallic embroidery thread that are forming the roses of this bouquet of flowers. Next, please. Details, so you can kind of see how shiny it is. Next. So this is at the CAM show right now. And these are just Atlanticans like hanging out. Like we have a lot of rules and physics on Atlantica. For example, if you're overwhelmed, you can clone your whole self, or you can clone different body parts that you need. Like if you need like 3 extra hands, 4 extra feet. So these are all clones that are posing together. On Earth, they are part of the Cowgirls of Color collective. They compete in rodeos. But on Atlantica, they're, I have several motifs that I repeat a lot in my work, like the crowns are rays that go in between like glitter and wax fabric, and the gate is hand sewn sequins, and the figures are watercolor. And this piece is consisting of 72-inch by 102-inch panels, canvas panels. Next. This is another alternative history piece, appropriated women's suffragette photo with the true founders of Earth feminism. Next. This piece has caused, I was hesitant to put this, that's why I didn't send this at first, because it's caused a lot of controversy at the museum where people were threatening to damage the piece. Mainly because they're offended by a Black woman in a bikini enjoying herself on the beach on another planet. This piece is called Dune. I was obviously reading Dune while I was working on it, and I was like, this is how Dune would be for us. Flanking the center blanket is Gervais in her CPAP mask that I was like, well, that's what we would wear while we're mining for spice. And then we have Astra Marie in the center. It caused controversy all around. Like originally someone at the museum put up a sign warning visitors, and then a few curators and critics complained about it and was like, why are we warning visitors? I don't see any nudity. There's nothing in there. And we had to sit with ourselves and be like, wow, like we really aren't still allowed to wear a bathing suit, like, and just be. So, and then we had visitors go, I've seen them a few times when I was there that were like, oh, it's so disrespectful. But it's really Dune. It's like superimposed images of Namibia, which is on my list of where I need to be soon. And it's a 3-paneled woven tapestry. Hard to see in the picture again is that there is glitter painting all throughout it. Next, please. Or is that it? That's it.
Ooh, yes, 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 yes. Thank you. The Dune piece was and absolutely my favorite piece in the show. And I'm really interested to hear how inside the arts institutions we have to like investigate and interrogate and really disrupt our issues around body size, fatness, fat phobia. Again, this kind of like gender performativity in the way in which women's bodies have to show up in a particular way in a swimming suit. Yeah, this idea of warning people, you know, that there's something that might be, I don't know, shocking or offensive to you. Now, given you've walked into a museum, art is subjective. I expect to be offended, shaken, disrupted. That's why I came. That's why I showed up. So thank you for your practice. Thank you for just exploring these stories with us and absolutely getting us inside of our head around like, okay, what is valid here? What do we get to say is art here? Niama, I really want to invite you to like, respond as well. And I'll read some of the thoughts that are in the chat too.
I really love that, like, because, when I was doing my nails more before the pandemic, this was like the famous, like, this is the selfie, this is the shot. And I just love that, particularly one of the last images that you showed, not the very last, but I think the one before. Because it's this idea, right? Like, we are the roses, are we not? And I really love that. And I think that's beautiful and poetic. I was taking a lot of notes here. I really love that idea of glitter as currency as well. Like, as you said, it gets into everything. And there's also this idea of like, it's almost contagious. And like, what if wealth could be contagious? Like, what if there was not these sort of constructs built around who can have and who shouldn't have, right? I love that. Beautiful. Thank you so much.
Beautiful. You also put a question, was that a wand? There was a piece.
Yeah. That was in the first piece of the Beyoncés. The Beyoncé suffragists.
Was that a wand, April?
I think it was the handle of the umbrella.
Oh.
Really? Because it was definitely like that.
Like her cane, that cane that Beyonce uses sometimes, but you're saying it was the umbrella. Okay.
I'd have to see which one you're talking about now.
Okay.
What was your first one? Let's see. There's some other comments. Love the idea of appropriating patterns and appropriators, of the appropriators. Amazing texture, very stunning painting, beautiful piece, fantastic. Atlantica and alternative histories. So, I mean, these are the pieces that are, I mean, they were stunning to me. So if you have an opportunity to go to be in LA and go to CAM and to kind of like walk through the tapestries, because they're grand, it's like you come up against them and you're like, how? So I have a question on how do you actually make them? Like, do you make them on the floor? Are you stitching them? Are they quilted pieces? Do you have a team of people that support you in making them? Literally, how do you?
Well, they start off digitally first. That took me a year to figure out because the printers they have a limited palette. So they don't really output an RGB or CMYK. It's like a hybrid of both. And then the colors are very muted. So the digital art goes to printing. It's a family-owned business in North Carolina, I think. And when I get them back, it's a matter of cutting templates out, sewing in fabric, painting onto them. I struggled with the idea to leave them as blankets, and it was important to me to leave them as blankets as they come because that's how we gift them. But also, they're all hung in the show on with clothespins on a line, which is referencing like my most dreaded chore that I had to do in the Bahamas growing up. But that also kind of had like a weird satisfaction when I was doing it, because I'm really obsessed with clothespins and the design of them. I always have been. I always thought that they were really cool and beautiful. And so like they're all hanging with like glitter and metallic giant clothespins. And when I sew into them, I use a quilting frame, which is like, it's like a table with a hole in it. So you can roll up one side of the blanket and the other, and then you can sew underneath. I'm still trying to figure it out for the back, but I do have assistants that cut out letters and cut out fabric, but I do the sewing.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. There's a lot of conversation recently again around the utility of women's work, or what is considered women's craft, the use of textile, the making of material, weaving, making thread, making material, and then actually quilting things and putting our stories, alternative, expansive stories onto these tapestries. And so, our friend Bisa Butler has had a huge amount of success recently with her amazing show in Chicago. And lots of other artists. Rosalie Tompkins had a retrospective at the Berkeley Art Museum at Pacific Film Archive that just closed recently, in her work, and Guy's Bin, and just the resurgence of tapestry. And then the last thing I wanted, if you could speak a little bit more to the putting of faces on cloth and us wearing them, which is so West African as well. It's like Nigerian folk, and being that both of you all have history, legacy in the Caribbean, I didn't know that was also something that comes, it obviously came through the transatlantic slave trade, clearly, but wearing clothes with someone's face on it, when you're going to the wedding for them, or when you're going to a funeral, that, you kept them as blankets. Can you say a little bit more about the history of the gifting of blankets?
Well, we have like the really crappy history of gifting blankets and spreading disease, but I always saw it from the point of view of like how the person feels who's gifting it. If you think about it, it's such a loving act to say, I really love your face, and so I put it on this blanket and I want to give you your face so you see how much I love it. And like, at least that's how I feel when I do stuff like that. Or like, I want to wear you on my body because I just love you, and I want everyone to know what you look like, and you should look at yourself too and see how lovable you are. That's always the context in my culture in which it's given, like to remember someone or to make something custom that has that customization of identity that you're proclaiming love for. There, in my research with textiles, I went up and down the West African coast. I started in Bali or Indonesia because they're doing batiks with Adinkra symbols on it, and they don't really know what the Adinkra symbols mean. They just know that that's what sells, and I don't even think the tourists know what it means. But the colonialism that the Dutch attempted to take the printing process from Indonesia and failed, and had to bring it to West Africa, and West African women made the whole market, like the taste, the style. And to this day, bundles of that fabric is given as gifts, and submitted as designs to the Dutch companies that created the style. And I think that's really important because it's a soft giving. It's very soft and tender, and I like that aspect, which is why I leave it in the work. I've seen so many versions of the same process that's been altered in some way, and I've started altering it myself. But even on the panels, even though it's not needed, I still do a blanket stitch around the whole panel. It's obnoxious and absurd, but I still want the feeling of something soft juxtaposed against something hard and serious.
Yes, thank you.
If I may, I think, that's what makes it radical, right? like that infusion of softness, that infusion of care into the process.
Mm-hmm. An insistence of softness.
Mm-hmm.
Niama, let's get into your images and your slides and story.
Right.
Go.
Let's just...
People feel free to put your questions and comments into the chat as well.
Boom, let's go. Okay, so that's me. Everybody can see that, okay? Yes? I'm hearing no sound.
Yes, yes.
Thank you.
Sorry, I forgot you couldn't see us. Yes.
Yeah. So I do a lot of things. As we've established, I'm a curator. I'm a producer, I'm an organizer. I'm also an artist in multiple disciplines as well. Very blessed, if you will, to have so many gifts and to be able to use them. So let's talk about event curation and production. So many of you, I think Ashara, you shared that this was how you became aware of me. I began doing this last year, last spring in particular, in May of 2020. It was a series called 4-4. And so with it, you know, during the beginning of the pandemic, everybody was on Zoom, everybody was on Instagram Live and whatever other sort of video interfacing platform that they could find. But I just felt like the conversations that were being had, if they did include Black women, which more often than not, they did not, it was just not, for me, in my opinion, it was not like really an appropriate way to include them. It wasn't a way that like was offering something to them, you know? And so I created this series in an effort to address that. So it was really for Black women and non-binary people shaping the arts and culture, not just here in the United States, but across the globe. So we had people like Raku Sile, who is one of the founders of Addis Fine Arts in Ethiopia, Vanessa L. German, who many of you know is an incredible performing and sculpture artist or mixed media artist. Dominique de Rousseau, who is actually now in an MFA program at Yale. She's an incredible performance artist, painter, etc. Olaronke Akinwomo, who is the founder of the Free Black Women's Library and also a printmaker and set designer. I mean, it's interesting because it became something that was not, like, it was really not about me. Like, all I did was like read their bios. And I was just like, whatever you want to do, whatever you want to talk about, that's what we're going to talk about. So it was very much about community and creating that space. These are all available on YouTube. For the most part, I think there's like one that is slightly muted for like maybe 4 minutes or something because of like a rights issue, but you definitely can access any of those. It exists in a channel on YouTube. This next bit, Juneteenth Jubilee. So this is actually the second of these. We started Juneteenth Jubilee last year up in Harlem in coalition with a group called the Intersectional Voices Collective, which is a group of queer, Latinx, and Black trans and queer folks. Also the Blacksmiths, which is a group that I co-founded also around the same time. Originally, it was just like a phone call, like, okay, we should do something for Juneteenth. And I was like, well, listen, everybody. So this conversation took place on June 8th of 2020. And I was like, well, Juneteenth is in 11 days, y'all. So that's cool. We can totally do something. But, you know, of course, at that point, the country was practically on fire, right? So this conversation about how do we use this momentum to take us somewhere was something that I've thought was kind of more the conversation that we should be having rather than just like having Juneteenth be an endpoint. So this year, I was the lead producer for that, again, produced in coalition with the Blacksmiths as well as the Wide Awakes. So we had working with us, my partner, Bryce Rosenblum. We also had, of course, the incredible Helena Metafaria, also incredible group of other women artists, Damali Abrams, Elvira Clayton, Ayana Dozier, again, Adama Delphine Fawundu, Dylan Gardner, Jody Linky Chow, Jasmine Morel, and incredible women performers like Carmen Rogers, Tiffany Smith, also is another visual artist from the Bahamas, and incredible musicians whose names are all there. You can read them. Candace Hoyes and Mimi Jones led them. It was an awesome experience. And I'll show you this cute little video. And this is, of course, Ebony Wildcat Brown, who I believe has guest before.
Come on, Brooklyn, let me see you move. It's not that high. Come on, the baby got it.
It was a really beautiful day. We really wanted to center the resilience and creativity of Black women. And so we were able to offer that as a next, I mentioned Joy to the Polls a bit before. So this is just a quick video of kind of a sizzle reel, if you will, of everything over the weekend. So they actually launched Joy to the Polls the weekend before. So that would have been like 2 weeks before Election Day, because of course there was early voting in many places. Early voting in New York was quite the situation. So that first weekend of early voting, I wanted to say that there were like, people were in line for like, 4 and 5 hours. And that's sort of unheard of in these parts. So I was like, they were mostly focused on Philadelphia because of course, Pennsylvania was a battleground state. But I said like, listen, we should really be doing something here. And they were like, okay, here's 10 grand. And I was like, thank you. I have 4 days to pull this together. And by some miracle, I was able to do so. So I was able to have the Resistance Revival Chorus, the Kai Soko Mungo Jumbis that I mentioned before, Russell Hall, Michaela Marino Lerman, Yazara St. James, DJ Gab Soul, DJ Out of Office. It was really a beautiful experience. So we basically jumped from early voting site to early voting site. So we identified about 4 sites for each day. And we just kind of set up shop there and had like water and snacks for people if they were in line. Just really trying to keep people in line to vote and to really, if there was a situation where there was a kind of like aggressive thing happening, the music, the joy, the sound was meant to diffuse anything that might have happened. But we thankfully didn't encounter any of that. And it was generally just really beautiful. I'll let you see. All right, so that was that. I also am very lucky to work with Black Artists and Designers Guild in many different capacities. So earlier this year, they launched a virtual concept house, which was actually based in Oakland, Obsidian House. And so it was meant to be this intergenerational space for a family set 5 years in the future. And so what I was able to do was invite, artists, art historians, architects, et cetera, public historians, to really just be in different conversations about the ways that the intersections of their work and the intersections of the design work that was happening with the home could meet. And so ultimately, the house, as I said, showcases spaces designed by 23 Bad Guild members and honors the legacy of creativity and cultural traditions of the diaspora. I believe you can still access this on the Bad Guild site. So that's badguild.info if you would like to check it out. So there were 6 conversations that I curated for the sort of launch weekend of this. It was really incredible. I was able to include Zoe Charlton, who's also a former Blatant guest, Anita Bateman, AJ Gerard, Michelle Joan Wilkinson, so many people. Awesome series of conversations, if I may say. Also last fall, I was invited to curate this series of conversations called Marking Absences and Shifting Narratives with the Goethe Institute and 1014, which are both 2 German arts organizations based here in New York. So I invited artists, scholars, urban planners, and other community stakeholders to open dialogue on the development of new contemporary public art and monuments in New York and elsewhere abroad across the globe. With an ethos of care, community responsiveness, and equity in mind. So we were able to include Alicia B. Wormsley, who's based in Pittsburgh with her project, There Are Black People in the Future, which of course is, you know, that's what all of this is about, right? Projecting ourselves into the future. Walter Cruz, Kenseth Armstead, Gerald Cooper, who has Hood Mid-Century Modern, Dr. Natalie Hopkinson, who does, oh my God, it just flew right out of my head, but she's based in DC and does a lot of work around go-go and really like championing the existence of DC go-go culture. We can move on to my curation. So this is actually the latest exhibition that I curated, which just closed last month in August. Called Alternating Currents. And so with this show, it was emerging and mid-career artists really thinking about like, what did the pandemic do to artist practice, to who we are as persons? Like, what did it do to the way that we use material, the way that we're thinking through methodologies, the way that we're thinking about and using scale? So again, that included Alana Clark, Kiara Gopi, who's there in LA, Basil Kincaid, who I wanted to bring up when you brought up textiles and tapestries, Ashara, Ashanti Kindle, 2 of my students, Hugh Xing Lung and Rob Redding at Pratt, Yashua Kloss, Nugent Smith, Kari Turner, and so many more. This is one of the installation views. This is Ashanti's work, Ascension, stunning, stunning, stunning body of work. This is Hugh Ching Lung, Seen and Unseen, which honestly, the first time I saw this, I was just like, Miss what? Like, she's so soft-spoken and just so like thoughtful, but I was not expecting to see something like this. So this work is about the sort of ongoing oppression that people face under the Chinese Communist government. And of course, this is in reference to that most recent series of protests that were happening in Hong Kong. And this is Adama Delphine Fabundu's Form My Sons. This is a 2-channel video installation. Hopefully you'll have an opportunity to see it. Really, really beautiful. This is another project that I did recently with Dalbin Paris. So this was actually digital, so you can actually look this up and experience this quickly for yourself. So Irreverent Futures was the name of this project. I was thinking about it because originally this was supposed to have opened in November, which of course was the month of this huge election that we had here in the US. So I was thinking about like, what are the ways that even like come what may with this election, what do we do? What is the way that we reference ourselves in terms of the strategies that we're going to put forward to, you know, bring ourselves into the future? Irreverent to whiteness, irreverent to the things that basically every day try to kill us, right? So the ways that we can reference ourselves in civic engagement and healing and protection and global community building that support not just the survival, but the thriving of Black people. And so I was able to include 10 artists, including Krista David, Taha Clayton, Steph Foster, Laisho Johnson, Marcus Leslie Singleton, Tariq Shifra, and many more. And again, you can look this up pretty easily. Loved this. And just so you know, the sound that you heard, the music that you heard was actually composed by Chassol, who of course is the Afro-French composer. Last exhibition that we have here is In Plain Sight. So sight both is in vision and sight as in place. So this show, I was invited to guest curate at Art Space New Haven. So this date is actually wrong. So that should say November 2018 to March of 2019. So I was invited in like June, and I had to like come up with this whole concept in, very little time here, obviously. So it aimed to intervene and reflect on the accepted histories and formulations of labor, race, and commerce that have arisen through uneven exchange, dispossession, and forced migration, connecting New Haven and New England at large with Western Europe and West Africa and the Old World and South American, Caribbean, and American colonies in the New World throughout the last 4 centuries. The way that we think about New England as this like bastion of free thought, right? Like that's where all the Ivies are. But like, let's be honest, there is a lot of connection to the Caribbean through the slave trade. There is no like foundation of economic foundation of the American involvement in the slave trade if there is not complicity from the North. And if there's not the money, and there were cotton mills up there. And of course, the obvious, the dispossession of Native people from that land. So this exhibition was kind of trying to create a framing device to retriangulate those roots and think about Black and Native bodies in the Americas and the structures and the routes and the movements that all of that wrought. So I was able to invite 10 artists. Most of this was actually new work, which was crazy. This is Deborah Jack, who, if you're in New York, she has her 20-year retrospective opening tomorrow at Pen and Brush. Super excited about that. Incredible video installation. And so with this, there was actually, she's from St. Martin, Dutch St. Martin, if you're unfamiliar with her work. And a lot of the work is often looking directly at the sea. And so in this case, that sound, that rushing of the water of the ocean itself was kind of like, you could hear it in any part of the space. And for me, that was really important in terms of really like thinking about the sea as the thing that brings us here, for better or for worse, whether, you have been on this side of the Atlantic for however long. It's the thing that kept us here. It's the thing that allowed all of these various trade routes to flourish in the first place, right? So thinking about that as one looked at the work was important, I thought. This was work by Taj Russ, and these all were actually based on masks that were in the Yale Gallery of Art's collection. So thinking about these masks, not just as like fetish objects, but thinking about them as perhaps like this was somebody's face. These were hairstyles that people had. These were based on something. These were not just, random objects, right? This was another installation by Coleman Collins, Distancing Determining. I love this work so much. So anything that was on the left side of the screen was shot on this side of the Atlantic, anything that was on the right side. So these, of course, are longitudinal and latitudinal coordinates. And just really kind of picturing the most mundane of everyday Black life, the most mundane moments. And I think, you know, that's where the richness is, right? In the mundane. Of course, Adama Delphine Vuundu, her ongoing series In the Face of History, wherein I like to say she's acting as quantum witness by literally screen printing herself into these you know, archival, whether it's newsprint or advertisements or, you know, other primary source historical documents. And in this case, I think this might have been one of the first times that the work was like site specific, so referencing, you know, things that happened in Connecticut, New England in particular. Just gonna go through this real fast. I'm also very, very, how much time do I have? Very clear on why the writing about this work is important for now. Just really thinking about how the ways that we write and speak about the work now is going to impact what the historical record is later. So I was invited by Active Cultures, which is there in LA, in California, to write on Zina Sarawiwa's Table Manners, which was a installation with Times Square Arts recently, back in November, actually. Check that out when you can. This was an essay that I was invited to write on Brittany Leanne Williams' recent exhibition. She has a solo show here right now, but this was an exhibition that was up in the spring. Black women at or in the bend. If you know her work, there's a lot of like this Black woman figure bent at the waist. And that for me, you know, was a very generative space. We'll get to why in a bit. This was an essay that I was invited to write by National Sawdust, kind of about the work that we were doing last summer and into the fall with Joe to the Polls as well. This is an interview I was invited to create with Dawood Bey. And if I may say, it's like really good. I recently reread it because of course he has a recent and more work in this new body of work, A Night Coming, Tenderly Black, that just debuted, I guess, not last week, but the week before here in New York. Also, the God, Emma Amos, what a blessing it was to write about her. Of course, the other God, Joyce J. Scott, again, talking about fiber art and craft. This is like the person, right? If you don't know her work, I encourage you to look it up and maybe find the article, could be helpful. And then of course, I do often also write about sort of more like art historical things as well. So that I was able to write about this exhibition, which was at Brooklyn Museum. I'm wrapping it up. This was about a show that was at the Baltimore Museum of Art. And of course, this, you know, this giant Augusta Savage, when Dr. Jeffreen Hayes had her touring show that she originated, I was able to interview her and write that piece as well. And now the pièce de résistance, my studio practice, which interestingly, that last show of mine that I showed you in plain sight, maybe started me on this in a way. And so this is me painting at a residency I had this past summer at the Watermill Center. So this form, right? I am thinking about a lot of things, as you might have imagined, but this form is really something that I literally just started seeing in my mind, and like I was seeing it with my eyes, even though I was like looking at something else, and I was like, "Ooh, am I okay?" But I guess like I have to start making this, and so I kind of refer to this as the bend. I think that name may change into something more, but you know, the more I set my hands and brushes and whatever other tools that I have to explore pigment and this form, the gesture illuminates itself to something about life itself, again, this kind of bending, this kind of generative gesture, right? It's a mechanism for rest, for resetting, a fulcrum of survival. It launches us into life and death and all the pleasures in between, but in more sort of like philosophical terms, and thinking about history, thinking about Blackness, thinking about, you know, everything that Black people have survived and created in the process of that survival. Thinking about it as mathematical and thinking about it as a gesture of refusal, thinking about it as specifically a refusal against accounting or the counting that whiteness and capitalism kind of like enact on Black people and the culture that they produce, and thinking about resisting quantification, resisting measurability, resisting the gaze in a particular way. And thinking about this gesture as one toward freedom, right? And so I was invited to do this campaign with For Freedoms back in the spring, For Freedoms and AI for the People, for a campaign called Heart Recognition, which was really about really getting the AI algorithms that basically target Black people unjustly, getting all of those banned. So like your Pretty Polls and all of these other similar programs that police departments around the country use. And actually ended up being the only part of this series that was produced, because I think the campaign ended after mine. But they were out in the world and it was great. And so these phrases, if you can't read them, they are, algorithms cannot predict the innumerable possibilities of Blackness, because ultimately, again, that gesture is I'm thinking about the sort of, just a second, because there's like a very particular phrase that I want to say. There's a very particular thing here that I want to get to. It's like this idea of the sort of infinite potentiality of Blackness. Like this thinking about this as a void that is like, that has like more depth and like all the possibilities. It is a container of all possibilities, right? So thus, like no algorithm could ever be able to apprehend that, right? The next one, Black life thrives beyond your accounts and algorithms. Black life is greater than the sum of any data set. And that last one, stop adjusting. It feels like an anomaly to most people, but it's really about this idea that we adjust for so many things, even thinking about like, if you are an actuary or if you do insurance, like people adjust for inflation and they adjust for all of these other types of things. But like, what if we just stop doing that? What if we just let people live and breathe and exist as whatever they might be? Which is kind of what I was thinking in that process. And actually these are up now in the show Encoded Futures at Oxy Arts in LA, just opened on Thursday. And lastly,
need you to release everything that is holding you back, that is keeping you from believing you are worthy, that you are capable, that you are loved, that you matter, that you are matter. This is an offering for you of beauty, of love, of spiritual sustenance for your future, for our collective survival. We are our only and best hope. We have survived up to now, but mere survival is not enough. So this here is for you to step into. In order for our dreams to become reality, there must be a shift. And baby, this is it. This is a signal boost. I need you to release everything that is holding you back. All the weight, the doubt, the pain, the shame, the fatigue that keeps you from carving out a place for yourself in this world. This circle is sacred. A space for you to rest and reach the parts of yourself that need a reset. This circle is transformation. We celebrate the work of our ancestors and make room for that which is yet to come. This is for you, for us, for the babies, because one day everyone in this room will be an ancestor too. I don't want us to underestimate the price paid for us. We must pay too. This is for you, for us, for the babies, because one day everyone in this room will be an ancestor too.
All right, I did cut that short because I realized we're quite short on time. But that was
Oh, it was rich.
the whole thing.
Thank you. Rich and beautiful.
Ending.
April, do you want to respond briefly, quickly?
I actually could listen to that. I could listen to that for hours. It's so soothing to me.
Thank you so much. That's my first sound piece, y'all.
Okay.
There you go.
And I think I may make some amendments to it.
Okay. Yeah, so let's wrap up with, okay, where can folks find you? What are your websites and your social addresses? Tell me what, and put them in the chat as well so folks can.
Sure. Website is currently under construction. Hopefully that will be finished soon. But
yeah.
Meantime, I will share my Instagram. So that's 3 underscores and then my first name, Niama, and 3 more underscores.
3 underscores, okay. Thank you. And April, yours has, is that one? Just one, April
Just
Bey,
one.
And 1 underscore afterwards.
Yes, April Bey 1 underscore.
Okay. Let me make a couple of announcements and then we'll have the last kind of one breath question offering. So Blatant is, oh, where are we going? Blatant, also, we have a rare edition printed material that is available in Moad's bookstore. If you'd like to get both the inaugural issue that came out last year and the one coming up this year, you can go to the Moad website and check it out, buy it online. Also, we are excited about being able to continue the series, which is a bi-monthly series, ongoing conversation that we have. Next month, I'll be sitting at the table with Sydney Kane and Yetunde Olagbaju on Tuesday, November 16th, 4 p.m. to 5:30 or so Pacific time. And this conversation is also going to be in collaboration with the Sonoma County Museum and their upcoming exhibition, Collective Arising, A Positionality of Insistence by Black Bay Area Artists. So you can go to the Museum of the African Diaspora's website on the calendar page and RSVP for that. And as a reminder, you can become a member of the museum or donate right now by texting 56512 and typing in MOADSF. If you like this show and the programming that Moad offers, we invite you to support with your dollars, to support with your financial resources for the organization as well. I love how my phone loves to ring during this. And then there is a QR code that you can also hold up. You can hold your phone up to the screen right now. You can give a donation or you can become a member. I'm a member as well. And as a reminder, you can watch all of the past programming from Moad, including Blatant, on the YouTube page as well. So finally, I want to thank the partners who support the online programming, educational programming at the museum, including the California Humanities and their NE8 grant. And this show is being supported this year from the American Rescue Plan of 2021, because clearly we've all needed to be rescued. And then the partners who support Artists as First Responder, our organization, the Girls and Women of Color Collaborative, the African American Art and Culture Complex, Akinade Foundation, the San Francisco Foundation, the Wakanda Dream Lab, the Women's Foundation of California, and the Walter and Elise Haas Fund. And so here's the last question. It is a one breath kind of response. So whatever you can say in one breath. When was the last time you witnessed or experienced blatant joy?
I met a guy at a collector's dinner when I didn't want to be there who was wearing a shirt with colorful clothespins on it. And I felt a lot of joy because then we had a discussion about clothespins.
Okay.
Oh, I know what it was. So, if you know me well, I am a lover of memes. I have literally an entire group on Facebook. It's a secret group dedicated to sharing like the worst things that you find on the internet that make you laugh. But yeah, so there was a meme. I might, I can still have it real quick. Yeah. I got pulled over by the cops, and this random lady rolled up screaming somebody had just shot 2 blocks away and pulled off. The police gave me my blank back and took off. The lady pulled back up and yelled, "That's Detroit love, baby," and drove off, and I didn't get a ticket. And I just thought it was the most hilarious thing ever. Not anybody from Detroit. You're from Detroit.
From Detroit. What
But
up?
that may have resonated with you more.
Shout out to the D and all my crew. I'm actually back.
It's actually really warm in the D. It's not cold in the D.
No, there's
each other.
There's seasons in Detroit.
I mean, like warmth in terms of love,
Well, there's that. Well, everybody from Detroit is okay. Lauren Hood, I see you in the house, the urban planner in the house. So here's my joy piece. It happened right before we got online. I realized that today was September 21st. There's a whole song, if you all might remember, Earth, Wind, and Fire. It's called Dancing in September. That's today. It's today's date. So I'm getting ready to get off the screen, and I'm getting ready to go turn on some Earth, Wind, and Fire and dance it out and celebrate this full moon and this fall equinox and celebrate you all. It's been my pleasure and my joy to spend this little bit of time with you today and to get a little peek and share your art practice and some of your thoughts around what it means to be special in terms of being a healer and a giver and a practitioner. And so much gratitude and thank you so much for your work and for just being beautiful Black women who make art, who make things. You
so
are
much.
amazing. Much
I'm
love.
sorry, I feel like I took like more time than I should have, but
no, we take up space here. Black women take up space here. give each other grace, space, love, and adoration, and absolute devotion. So thank you for that. Thank you, Elizabeth.
Thank you.
Yeah. And thank you everyone for joining us. We'll see you in November. Peace.
Thanks everybody. Have a great
Take care, everyone.
rest of your day.
Thank you.
Stay well.
Be well.
Bye.